This video was made possible thanks to my amazing patrons at patreon.com/magicalhacker. If you're not a patron and you would like me to make a video for you each month using your decks, become a patron today.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Grim Backwoods. This is my live podcast that I do here on YouTube and on Twitch, where if you want to add to the conversation, if you want to ask questions, you can do that live. So we are here. It is a good old Mother's Day. Make sure to say Happy Mother's Day to you, those of you with moms. So we're going to go ahead and talk today about Boom Pile, something that I really like. I play it in more decks than I play literally Sol Ring. So I think it's a really good one. Hopefully, as I go through everything here, you will agree as well. So again, if you have any questions or anything you'd like to add to the conversation, feel free to do that while we're going through the presentation. All right, well, let's go ahead and start off by actually reading off Boom Pile. So the card that we're talking about today, Boom Pile, 4 mana for an artifact. You can tap it to flip a coin. If you win the flip, destroy all non-land permanents. Simple. It's just got one ability, just 2 lines of text. So why would I actually like this card? Well, we're going to jump into that, but let me give you a little bit of history about Boom Pile. Just these past few days, we've gotten some pretty big names in Magic talking about Boom Pile. So this was kind of the inspiration for me wanting to do it so soon. I had always wanted to do this type of video. I wanted to have it, but I always put it on the back burner, always just in the plan rather in the let's do it now. And so the first name that you might have heard of, Saffron Olive, he said, we should really play more Legacy. And he posts a picture here from a third place deck that won third place in a Legacy challenge with 2 copies of Boom Pile in the main board. He was looking at this like, what the heck, Boom Pile? Why are you playing this card? Well, I'm excited to play some more Legacy because that seems super weird. He had another big name talking about it with Gavin Verhey. He said there is little more enjoyable than watching a whole commander table try to simultaneously figure out how to hedge their bets to your Boom Pile activation, hashtag WotC staff. So if you haven't heard, Gavin Verhey, pretty big name in the research development, all the design behind the cards, a lot of it goes through him. So these 2 big names, both talking about Boom Pile, I said, you know what? Perfect time to talk about it. Now, if you're wondering, this is not necessarily the best board wipe in all of Commander. I would say that there's one that's certainly a lot better than that. That's Cyclonic Rift. That's the one that I think of as being the #1 best board wipe in the entire format. However, I would say Boom Pile is second. And so Cyclonic Rift, for 7 mana, you can make sure that you deal with all non-land permanents, only of that your opponents control, at instant speed. So all those 3 factors, the fact that it's only 7 mana, feels super undercosted. But this is a powerful card in Commander. You probably have heard of it. I think it's like the 2nd, 3rd, or 4th most popular card in the entire format. I think it's a very, very powerful card. But that makes Boom Pile #2. If I'm saying that, then that makes other board wipes even less than that. So what about the really good Hour of Revelation, right? That's 6 mana, but it can cost 3 less if there are 10 or more non-land permanents on the battlefield, and it destroys all non-land permanents. You don't have to tap anything. You don't have to flip a coin or anything. It just does it for 3 mana. So why do I actually feel that Boom Pile is better than Hour of Revelation? Even in my white decks, why do I like Boom Pile more? We're going to go into that here through the rest of the video. So again, we're going to take a look at Boom Pile, and the first thing I'd like to ask is this. What cards are similar to Boom Pile? Because if you can kind of compare things to things that are kind of in a similar category, we can start to understand why I like Boom Pile so much. Unspoken Blood says, I feel a spike in price incoming. Well, you heard it here first. Get your Boom Piles before they're too expensive, right? But we got Boom Pile, 4 mana. It's colorless, right? That's the first thing I think of when I look at Boom Pile. Its identity is colorless, so it can go into any deck. If you've got a mono white deck, Boom Pile. If you've got a 5-color deck, Boom Pile. If you've got a colorless deck, Boom Pile. You can put Boom Pile any deck. And why is that helpful? Well, no matter what deck you're playing, there's going to be things that you can deal with and certain things that you can't deal with. Boom Pile can deal with everything, but it's not the only thing that can do that. There are 4 cards that I think of as being comparable to Boom Pile. I wouldn't say these are just as good, but they're kind of in that same area. They're colorless. You can play them in any deck. They deal with all non-land permanents. And those 4 cards are going to be Oblivion Stone, Coercive Portal, Nevinyrral's Disc, and Perilous Vault. So these 4, I think, if you're going to be making a comparison to any of these, it makes a lot of sense to compare to something else. It's a lot of different changes you have to make. But these, you can kind of compare. So we've got Oblivion Stone, 3 mana for an artifact. We can pay 4 and tap it to put a fate counter on target permanent, or, more importantly, we can pay 5 and tap it to sacrifice it and destroy each non-land permanent without a fate counter on it, then remove all fate counters from all permanents. So essentially with Oblivion Stone, if you wanted to wait a couple of extra turns and pay some extra mana, you can make it so that there are certain things that don't get destroyed, but in most situations, if you're trying to use it as a board wipe, the best way to use it is to pay 3 mana for it, pay 5 mana, tap it, and sacrifice it to destroy all the non-land permanents. And of course, there might be a world where there's a fate counter on something that you can't destroy, but most of the time, Oblivion Stone is just going to destroy all non-land permanents. So that's the first one I think that you can really compare it to. The second one, Coercive Portal, also 4 mana and an artifact, has one ability. It's a Will of the Council ability, which says at the beginning of your upkeep, starting with you, each player votes for Carnage or Homage. If Carnage gets more votes, sacrifice Coercive Portal and destroy all non-land permanents. If Homage gets more votes or the vote is tied, draw a card. So that's another card that's similar to it. We do have to wait until the next upkeep of ours, where we can make some votes, and either it wins and we get the board wipe, but if it doesn't win, hey, at least we get a card draw off of that for 4 mana, which is not bad. You can keep drawing cards off of it until it wipes away the board. Third thing that we can compare it here to, and Unspoken Blood definitely is asking about this, what about the disc? Nevinyrral's Disc, 4 mana for an artifact, enters the battlefield tapped. However, you can pay 1 mana and tap it to destroy all artifacts, creatures, and enchantments. So you can't hit Planeswalkers, which you would be able to hit with Boompile, but Nevinyrral Disc has the benefit of hitting artifact lands and creature lands, which Boompile would not be able to hit. So you get a little bit, you take a little bit away. Which one matters more? Which one are you going to see more often? Planeswalkers or creature lands? I think more so, you're more likely to see a lot of Planeswalkers, in my opinion. But you never know. It might be in a metagame where there's a lot of creature lands out there. So that's Nevinyrral's Disc. And then we've also got Perilous Vault. So this is a 4 mana artifact that you can pay 5 and tap and exile to exile all non-land permanents. So there's a lot of benefit here. You've got a bunch of things where you can use these types of artifacts to get rid of the board. You can get rid of a lot of things here with these cards. So where is Boompile, where does it stand compared to these? Let's take a look at, I think, 2 important aspects that you can have with some of these cards. When you're in a situation where you need a board wipe, usually it's because you're either on the verge of dying or somebody's got a lot of value that you need to stop as soon as you can, as quickly as possible. So let's take a look at the cards that you can actually use to get rid of the board immediately. I think that immediateness of the card being able to answer something, I think that's a pretty big deal. That's a pretty important thing to ask yourself. So let's take a look at these 4 cards and Boompile. Which one of these can be activated and destroy the board immediately? Well, obviously Boompile can. It can come down, tap it, and you could potentially destroy the board instantly. Oblivion Stone, if you have 8 mana, you can pay it down, you play it, sacrifice it, and destroy the whole board. That works as well. Perilous Vault costs 9 mana, but hey, you exile the whole board, so you can get rid of the indestructible things as well. Whereas Coercive Portal, not really. You have to wait until your upkeep. So that's a little bit of a downside. You can't actually board wipe the board away until your next upkeep. Nevinyrral's Disc, same thing, except this time you have to wait until your untap step, unless you've got a way to untap Nevinyrral's Disc. So both of these cards, you kind of have to wait a full round of the turn, which, when you think about that, that can make it open to some type of interaction. So let's say I'm an opponent, and I've got a pretty big board state, I've got a lot of value, I've got some mana open, and I've got a Naturalize in hand. If you play a Boompile out there, I might want to play a Naturalize in response, once it comes down to the battlefield, but you can just tap it and maybe blow up the board anyways, even with the Naturalize on the stack. Oblivion Stone, Perilous Vault, same thing. I might cast my Naturalize, but you can just activate it in response and blow up the board. If you've got a Coercive Portal or a Nevinyrral's Disc, doesn't work that way. If you've got those 2 on the battlefield, I can use a Naturalize to stop you from board wiping my board. So that's a pretty big downside to Nevinyrral's Disc and Coercive Portal. They get turned off if anybody has a way to deal with an artifact, which, let's be honest, this is Commander. Lots of people are playing spot removal. And so for that reason, I think Coercive Portal and Nevinyrral's Disc, they're not that great as Boompile in that aspect. But let's take a look at another aspect, right? What about cost? Because if you're in a situation where somebody got a lot of value, there's no guarantee that this is going to be late in the game. It could be happening super early, or it could be happening in a time where you actually need to cast something else on top of that too. So you need to cast the board up, and you need to follow it up with something else that'll help you survive. So how many of these can be cast for a low mana value? How many of them don't require a ton of mana? Well, Boompile and Coercive Portal, these are the 2 cheapest options. They both cost 4. Nevinyrral Disc is going to cost a total of 5 in order to activate it that turn as quickly as you can. So 5 mana from the Nevinyrral's Disc. Oblivion Stone and Perilous Vault, the total amount of mana you're going to have to spend to activate it is going to be 8 for Oblivion Stone and 9 for Perilous Vault. So those two definitely feel like, oh, that's really, really expensive just to wipe away the board. Whereas Coercive Portal, Nevinyrral's Disc, and Boom Pile cost a lot less, 4 or 5 mana. So, with those two aspects in mind, what is the only card that can be used immediately and costs 5 mana or less to activate? The only card that does that is Boom Pile. And again, we're looking at colorless options. You might be looking at other colors and saying what you have available, but if you're playing a monocolor deck or a colorless deck and you don't have that specific option that you like using in your color identity, you've got to have something, and I think Boom Pile is a great card. So this is kind of the history behind it. That's the way I was thinking about it. I was thinking about, okay, great, it only costs 4 to play and activate. There are situations where it can save me from dying, where no other card would save me from. It can also help me be the first one to rebuild from my board state because it costs so little mana. In fact, it also destroys things either immediately or at instant speed. Both of those are pretty nice. If you want to destroy something immediately, you don't have to worry about an opponent having a naturalize to stop you. Activating at instant speed can be used in a lot of great ways. You can stop something while something's on the stack. You can stop an infinite combo when they're about to cast the other piece. You can stop a combat step. There's a lot of things you can do with being able to board wipe at instant speed with any of these cards. So, let's talk about the history. I talked about how when you're playing monocolored, sometimes you need to have access to other things, and that's kind of how it happened. When I first started this channel, I knew I wanted to do a deck of every color identity, except for the quad colors, which I feel like are super similar to a pentacolored deck. And so I replaced those 5 with 5 additional monocolored decks because there's so many options for monocolored that I feel like I have to do 2 for each monocolor. There's just too many options. So that's the way I looked at it. But the second deck that I had built was Atali Primal Storm. So this is the second deck that I used for my channel. And when I first built Atali Primal Storm, this was a mono red deck. I hadn't really done a whole lot of mono red up to this point. And when I went to this section of the deck where I was going to start putting in board wipes, I realized, okay, I don't have Cyclonic Rift. I don't have Hour of Revelation. You know, I want to be able to deal with a lot of permanents all at the same time. I've got Blasphemous Act and I've got Chain Reaction. Both of those are really great with dealing with creatures. I've got Vandal Blast. That's a great card for dealing with artifacts. But, man, enchantments? What happens? What happens if I'm playing this deck and then suddenly someone gets down a really brutal enchantment that is going to just shut my deck down, right? Maybe they got an enchantment that says I can only cast 1 spell per turn. Maybe they got an enchantment out there that will prevent my creature from attacking, right? I need to be able to find something that allows me to get rid of enchantments, but I'm playing red. So do I go with Oblivion Stone? It's okay, but it is 8 mana. Do I go with Coercive Portal? A little bit unreliable. It feels like it's only going to let me draw cards when I want it to board wipe, and board wipe when I want it to draw cards. So probably not. Do I go with Perilous Vault? Okay, yeah, that seems like a little bit of a rough one. Because there are some things in this deck that actually I'm using for recursion, so I don't want to like exile my stuff too. So that one kind of felt like it was a bad idea. Not to mention it's 9 mana, which feels really, really expensive. And then Nevinyrral's Disc, it's not bad. You know, I kind of like Nevinyrral's Disc, but let me look at Nevinyrral's Disc and Boom Pile. These are the two that I was kind of going between. And when I looked at Atali, because we're casting things at random in a way, because this is a 6-drop legendary 6/6 Elder Dinosaur that says whenever it attacks, exile the top card of each player's library. Then you may cast any number of spells from among those cards without paying their mana costs. So it felt very kind of random. It felt very chaotic. And you know what I said? Let's add a couple of chaos cards, not to try to build a fully chaos deck, because I'm not a huge fan of those, but if we're doing a little bit of chaotic stuff too, why don't we just add in a few more? I have a couple of slots here. Let's add in Boom Pile. The flip seems kind of interesting. Why not? I added in Boom Pile, and let me tell you, actually playing the card did more to convince me that this is a good card than anything. If I had heard somebody talking about Boom Pile, maybe I'd have been like you, it seems okay, but I don't think it's worth actually playing. You know, it's a flip ability. You know, what if I lose the flip? That doesn't seem that great for me. I'm kind of playing a card that doesn't do anything. But as I got to play Boom Pile, and I kind of realized there's a lot of different ways that you can actually approach just such a simple ability and twist it into being almost completely asymmetrical. I just feel like it's such a great card. I love talking about it. And after I played it in Atali, I added it to Dragon Lord Silmagar because I said, this is a really good card. I got to play it in all my decks from now on. And every time I played it, I felt really happy to have it in the deck. So again, we can do a lot of things with it. Let me go through the process of what I felt, what I saw when I was playing with Boom Pile in my Atali Primal Storm deck. Because again, it helped me deal with enchantments in this deck. But maybe you have a different color that you have a different type of permanent that your color can't deal with. If you're green, maybe you have a hard time dealing with creatures, right? Because it's colorless. You can play in a mono green deck. Maybe you're black and you have a hard time dealing with artifacts. Maybe you're blue and you have a hard time dealing with planeswalkers. All these situations, you can use the Boom Pile, and you can actually get rid of those permanents in a more permanent fashion. Obviously, if you're playing blue, you can use Cyclonic Rift, but is it better to have one card that can do something or two? I'll let you be I'll let you make the choice on that. All right, so we've got a Atali Primal Storm, and I liked it for the fact that it allows me to get rid of enchantments. But let me talk to you about what happened as I started to play it. So the first time you flip the coin, you're going to have a 50-50 chance of winning. So what would usually happen is, let's say I'm in a position where I'm behind everybody else, or I'm behind someone at the table, and I feel like, blowing up the board, I'll lose whatever I have on the board, but it's worth it if I can get rid of that opponent's permanents. So I play down the Boom Pile, and I wait until the end step before my turn, because I don't have to activate it right away. I can if I want to follow it up with something else, like let's say I have in my hand... what's a good example of this? Maybe I have a Atali in my hand, right? Or let's say I have a Fervor in my hand, which can give all my creatures haste. It's an enchantment. Maybe I want to go for Boom Pile, tap, see if it wins, see if I can destroy everything, and then follow it up with a Fervor so that next turn I can replay my Atali and actually have it with haste and get the advantage that way. So maybe there's a couple of times where I'd want to play it and activate it in the same turn. But most of the time the way it would work is, because I can activate it at instant speed, I'm just going to wait until I need to activate it. Sure, Coercive Grip can kind of get around that, but that's going to get around all of the other artifacts as well. So Coercive Grip is a card that will get rid of all of these permanents, but that's just one card. This is not going to be something that we can worry about having in our opponents having in their hand, and that's why we're not playing Boom Pile. So first time we flip the coin, 50% chance that we win, 50% chance that we lose. And this is going to be, again, at the end step before our turn. So the reason that we're doing that is because all three of our opponents have taken their turns. If they've seen our Boom Pile and they still decided to play out things, they may end up losing those permanents to our Boom Pile winning the flip. However, if they look at the Boom Pile and they say, okay, I don't want to play those things, then we can also make them skip their turn, kind of slow roll it a little bit more. So that's also beneficial for us. So we've got the Boom Pile. At the end step before our turn, we flip it. If we can win that flip, then the board is going to be clear. We're going to go to our turn, and we're going to be the first ones to rebuild. But what happens if we lose the flip, right? Let's say we lose the flip, we tapped and activated the Boom Pile. That's fine. It's going to be the end step. We're going to go to our turn, and our Boom Pile untaps. Again, we have all our mana open. All of our opponents have done their things. We're kind of in the same situation again. So at this point, during our upkeep or our untap or our draw step, we can activate the Boom Pile again, and if it wins then we'll actually be okay. We'll actually be able to be the first ones to rebuild anyway. So if we take that 50% chance that we lose the flip, and we cut that into two, giving a 50% chance of winning the second time or losing again the second time, it gives us this chart here. So 50% of the time we win the first flip, 25% of the time we lose the first flip, but we win the second flip, and then the last 25% of the time we lose both flips. So in this situation, only 25% of the time will you fail both of those flips and not be able to destroy all permanents with your Boom Pile, which means 75% of the time you're going to win either the first or the second flip with your Boom Pile, letting you be the first one to rebuild. That's, I think, the huge key. If there's one picture that I want you to understand, like why I like Boom Pile, it's probably this one right here, because you can be the first one to rebuild. You've paid 4 mana. People may have cast more permanents. Maybe they didn't. Maybe they tried to attack you and you said, I'm going to take it, or I'm going to use my Boom Pile right now, try to blow up the board. Regardless, you're going to be the first one to rebuild with the Boom Pile 75% of the time. And what's even better is you don't lose the Boom Pile if you lose those 2 flips. Boom Pile is still around. So you can use that Boom Pile again the next turn, and again the next turn. So it's very rare that you'll need to go up to a 5 or 6 flips before your Boom Pile will work. But 75% of the time, you'll be good. You'll win that flip. And so you won't lose any turns, and you will get to the point where you'll be the first one to be on the board. We've talked about how going first in a game of Magic and a game of Commander is a pretty big deal. Definitely a lot bigger deal than going second, third, or fourth. Second, third, and fourth place, whoever goes at the table, those are all kind of roughly the same in terms of win percentages. But going first, huge, huge advantage, because you're the first one to have 5 mana. You're the first one to have 6 mana. You're the first one to have 7 mana. You're the first one to have 8 mana. You're the first one to have 9 mana. All those things can happen because you're going first. So being able to reset the board, kind of reset what people have on the board as a result, gives you that chance to be the first place winner, just like if you had happened to go first, this time because you're activating Boom Pile. And there's something else to keep in mind. That flipping a coin is what makes it so that it only works sometimes. But you also have to remember that you're not paying any additional mana. Imagine if it was a 0-drop artifact and you had to pay 4 and tap it to flip a coin, and because then every time you have to pay 4 more mana, and 4 more mana, and 4 more mana. This time, you're only paying 0 more mana. So you're never going to be finding yourself, having to spend more than 4 mana on a Boom Pile unless somebody has a tax effect, which they're making it cost more. So that's the idea here. You've got Boom Pile. It's going to cast 4. It's eventually going to get, rid of the board state, unless someone goes for a Boom Pile and you lose the flip. If they try to use a Naturalize on it and you end up losing that activation, the flip on the activation, that's going to be like the only situation where Boom Pile is not going to do what you want it to do. But it's going to work 50% of the time for each flip. So if you have 2 flips that you can do in a row, which you should be able to have because of the way that Boom Pile works, that's going to give you a 75% chance of winning that flip before it comes to your next turn, or on your next turn before you've actually cast anything. That seems like a downside, right? I want to be able to have something that's going to activate and I can be relying on it and I can use it. But there's actually a benefit to this. When people are playing a deck that's going to have a lot of permanents on the board, either a lot of creatures or a lot of artifacts and enchantments, whatever they're playing, they're going to feel like, I've got to have some ways to protect my board in this deck. So people play things like Boros Charm and Heroic Intervention. Teferi's Protection is another one people play a lot of. I like Dark Dabbling as well. If you're playing a deck that doesn't have white or green and you have a lot of creatures, Dark Dabbling doesn't seem too bad. Now it does kind of get burnt by Damnation and Wrath of God. No, I'm sorry, not Wrath of God. Wrath of God. Wrath of God and Damnation. Those 2 cards say that they can't be regenerated. But if you're playing a deck that has a lot of creatures, sometimes regenerating your creatures is actually going to be a great idea. You have to have the Spell Mastery in order for it to work, but you do get a draw card, regardless if you have the Spell Mastery or not. So that kind of helps as well. That you can protect your board and also replace itself at the same time. So, Boros Charm, Heroic Intervention, Teferi's Protection, Dark Dabbling. These are some cards that I think of when I think of anti-board wipes. Boros Charm, a 2-mana instant, says permanent you control gain indestructible until end of turn. That's one of the 3 modes. Heroic Intervention, 2 mana for an instant, permanent you control gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. Teferi's Protection, 3 mana instant until your next turn. Your life total can't change, and you have protection from everything. All permanents you control phase out, and you exile Teferi's Protection. Dark Dabbling, Spell Mastery, if there are 2 or more instant or sorcery cards in your graveyard, also regenerate each other creature you control, and you draw a card from this card. So, really interesting cards here, but if you've got one of these in your hand, and your opponent taps a Boom Pile, do you cast it? Right, let me think about that. Do I decide to cast this card? Because if I decide not to cast it, and they lose the flip, okay, well that's not a big deal. I still have them in my hand. They still have the Boom Pile to activate. We're kind of in the same place that we started before. We just had to wait an extra turn. So, you can kind of take that chunk of it and say, well, regardless of what that results in, it's going to be whatever the rest of the pie looks like. So we really only have 3 options. Either A, I cast it, they win the flip, and I protect my permanents, perfect. I cast it, they lose the flip, and now I just wasted an anti-board wipe spell. Or I decide, I'm not going to cast it, and they also win the flip. So now I had that anti-board wipe in hand, but I didn't use it to protect my board. So when you're a player like this in a situation like that, what would you do, right? What would you actually do? Would you cast the anti-board wipe spell? Would you say, I'm okay. I don't really want to cast that here. It's a big question mark, right? Well, let's take a look at the chart. And I mentioned how there's really only 3 options. That 4th option, it does exist, but the results of what happens in that 4th option is just the other 3. It's just at a later turn. So these are the 3 options. Either the anti-board wipe is cast and we lose the flip, so they've wasted the anti-board wipe spell. They didn't cast it, and we win the flip, so they didn't use their anti-board wipe spell to protect their board, or they do cast it, and we do win the flip. So here's what ends up happening. As an opponent, I'm looking at this chart, and I'm saying, well, if I cast my anti-board wipe spell, there's a 50% chance that I'm going to be hurt. If I don't cast it, really, there's only one option that can happen. Either they don't win the flip here, and they'll win the flip later that I don't cast my anti-board wipe spell, or they win the flip right now, and I lose everything and I didn't cast my anti-board wipe spell. So let's say I do cast my anti-board wipe spell. Now that 50% chance of being reliable is not just for Boom Pile, it's also for the anti-board wipe spell. So that anti-board wipe spell, now we've added onto that a clause that says 50% of the time it's going to be cast at the wrong time. So that's a pretty amazing effect of that unreliability. Again, people tend to think of that as being a downside, but my opinion is that it is actually a really, really good upside. So yes, sometimes they'll cast the anti-board wipe spell, protect their board, but sometimes they'll cast it and they won't blow up their board, and you'll be able to activate it again and actually blow up their board. You can't do that with an Oblivion Stone. You can't do that with a Nevin Rolls Disc. You activate it, they're going to cast it, they know what's going to happen, and they're going to save their board. With Boom Pile, you can make it a little bit better than that. So that's another reason why I like Boom Pile so much. So, even though it's not as easy to predict when your Boom Pile is going to work, this is what causes it to naturally allow anti-board wipe spells to sometimes fail. That's a big, big key for why Boom Pile is so amazing. So we've talked about Boom Pile, and we haven't really talked about how to abuse it. This has all just been floor, right? We have not talked about the ceiling at all. This is all just floor. We were talking about you're using Boom Pile, you're not trying to take advantage of it, you're just playing it as a regular old, average board wipe that you're playing in your deck to try to blow up the board. That's it. But what about if you're trying to take advantage of it, right? What if you're trying to make that ceiling higher? That's where you can even go even higher than what we talked about, right? You've got cards like Academy Ruins, you've got Kiora's Follower, Krark's Thumb, Avison Angel of Hope. These are cards that you can use to take advantage of Boom Pile, to get even better. Academy Ruins can bring you that Boom Pile from your graveyard back to your library. You can draw into it and play it out again. So unlike maybe that Hour of Revelation or that Blasphemous Sack that you had in your deck, Academy Ruins allows you to bring that back to your hand, the Boom Pile, and allows you to board wipe again. Academy Ruins is not going to go anywhere because it's a land. It's not leaving, so Boom Pile is not going to destroy it. That's a great way to recur it. Just one example of how you can recur the Boom Pile in a way that allows you to cast it again. Kiora's Follower, let's say you activate the Boom Pile, you lose the flip, no problem. Tap the Kiora's Follower, untap your Boom Pile, try again. So that brings up that 75% chance of winning from 75% chance to, let me do a little bit of quick math here, I believe it's 15/16 of the time you will be able to be the first one to rebuild because of Kiora's Follower. Huge, huge advantage. And so I would say that's one big reason why I would love to take advantage of Boom Pile with a Kiora's Follower. Krark's Thumb, also kind of the same idea. You're flipping two coins. So let's say you've got a Krark's Thumb and a Boom Pile out there. You tap to activate it, and you're thinking, okay, now I've got a 75% chance of winning this one because if I lose both flips, that's only going to happen 25% of the time. But then your opponent says, you know what? In response, I'm going to cast my Teferi's Protection, and I'm going to get my board state to be protected from your Boom Pile because now it has a 75% chance of activating. From this position, you can say, now I actually want it to fail. So with the Krark's Thumb, instead of saying, I'm going to try to get it so that I can win the flip, now I'm trying to get it so I can lose the flip. And so if I flip the first coin and it's a heads, I'm going to ignore that one. And I'm going to flip the next one. Hey, that one's a tails. Perfect. I lost the flip here. Nothing gets blown up. You wasted your Teferi's Protection. Krark's Thumb, fantastic for taking advantage of Boom Pile. If you happen to be playing a flip a coin deck, you will definitely see how powerful Boom Pile is when you have synergies like this one. And the last one, probably my personal favorite, is Avison Angel of Hope. It's also Commander. So if you like Avison and you have a Commander deck for it, Avison's going to be pretty good here as well. So it's an 8-drop legendary 8/8 angel with flying, vigilance, and indestructible that says other permanents you control have indestructible. So it's a little bit of a flavor fail, but the way it works is Avison will give your Boom Pile indestructibility, and because it doesn't require it to sacrifice to flip the coin and see if it works, which I think is what people are assuming it does, you just tap it. And if it doesn't work, you tap it again later. With Avison Angel of Hope, even if it does work, you lose none of your permanents and your opponents lose all of theirs. Your Boom Pile stays around, it's indestructible, it cannot destroy itself. So again, a little bit of a flavor fail. What kind of bombs destroy everything and then don't destroy themselves? Doesn't make any sense. But Avison, a really great way to take advantage of Boom Pile. And again, if you have an Avison Commander deck, Boom Pile seems like a really, really good card to include. So let's do a quick summary over why I think Boom Pile is so powerful. So here are the 7 reasons, recapping what we talked about so far today. Number 1, its color identity is colorless, so it can go into any deck. That's a huge thing. That makes it very, very open-ended. If you're looking at Ruinous Ultimatum, 7-drop sorcery, destroys all non-land permanents your opponents control. It's a great card. Is it played that often? Not really. Why? Because it has so many colors in its in its mana cost, right? If you're playing a 5-color deck, it's an ultimatum. So you've got 3 white, 2 black, 2 red. Is that going to be easy for a 5-color deck to do? Not super easy, but I think in some situations still worth trying out. If you're playing a Mardu deck, that's a great place to play it. You know, if you're playing a 4-color deck, there's not a whole lot of options in terms of commanders for those. But if you're playing a 4-color deck and you have Mardu in your color identity, maybe you're playing Sans Green or you're playing Sans Blue, then yeah, sure, maybe toss in the Rune Ultimatum. But that's it. You really don't have the option to play that card in any of the other decks. Whereas Boom Pile, if you've got a commander deck, you could be playing Boom Pile. And I think that you really should. I think it's a really powerful card that will swing games for you, will make you win games that you would otherwise have lost. So that's the first reason. Color identity, colors can go into any deck. Number 2, it can deal with permanents that the color of the deck can't normally deal with. It lets red deal with enchantments, it lets green deal with creatures, it lets black deal with artifacts, and it lets blue deal with planeswalkers. That's a huge, huge thing. A lot of people talk about, well, I don't want to play a monocolored deck because I can't deal with planeswalkers. I don't want to play a mono green deck because then I won't be able to deal with creatures. I don't want to play this monocolored deck because then I can't deal with that type of permanent. Well, Boom Pile is basically something that says, no, you definitely can. You don't have to pay a lot of mana for it either. And on top of that, it's probably better than the things that you have to pay a lot of mana for anyways. So that's number 2 reason why I think Boom Pile is powerful. Number 3, it only costs 4 mana to play and activate. So there are more situations where it can save you from dying, and it's easier to be the first to rebuild your board state. That's a huge, huge aspect of why Boom Pile is so awesome. If I'm playing a Blasphemous Act, one of the reasons why it's so powerful is because it costs, in a lot of situations, 1 mana. 1 red mana, I can deal 13 damage to every creature. Even though it normally costs 9, it costs 1 less for each creature on the battlefield. So if I can pay for 1 mana, I can blow all the creatures up, and then I have the rest of my mana to work with. I can play a bunch of creatures out there and be the first one to rebuild. Boom Pile is just like Blasphemous Act, except you don't have to pay the 1 mana on your turn either. You have just the 4 mana on the previous turn, and that allows you to be the first to rebuild. And if you wanted to play it, activate it right away, and then rebuild, that's also another option. You don't have to wait until your next turn like you would with Coercive Portal or with Nevinyrral's Disc. So that's the 4 mana to play and activate, number 3 on the list. Number 4, it can immediately or at instant speed destroy things. That's huge. Because sometimes you want to destroy things immediately. There's something on the board that if that opponent is able to get to your end step, all right, or they get to the next untap step, it's a huge problem. Like maybe somebody's got a Seedborn Muse out there. You played on your Boom Pile, you're like, I got to get rid of the Seedborn Muse right now. If they keep getting mana, they're going to find something that will destroy my Boom Pile or prevent it from activating, and I got to make sure that I do not let that happen. So you might want to destroy things immediately. It can do that, right, for 4 mana. Or you might say, I want to wait until I need to use it. I want to wait till I can get to the end step before my turn, try to activate it, go to my upkeep, try to activate it, and see if I can get a 75% chance of destroying all the board and being the first one to rebuild. That's amazing. Also, you get to blank combat sometimes. So an opponent might say, yeah, you know, that person has a Boom Pile. I mean, they're going to blow up things anyways, but I might as well attack somebody else, get some damage in before the Boom Pile gets blown up. So that might be a way that people will look at it, and that is number 4 here on the list. Number 5, even though it's not as easy to predict when it works, this is actually an upside, not a downside. This is a feature, not a bug. This is what allows it to naturally cause anti-board wipes to sometimes fail. Huge thing, especially if you're playing in a metagame where there's a lot of these types of cards. Teferi's Protection, Heroic Intervention, and Boros Charm are kind of the big 3 that I think of. Then you're definitely going to want to have a Boom Pile where you can play this down and actually make those only work 50% of the time, which is a huge benefit, right? And again, people might not be thinking of the math right away. They might not think, okay, it's always beneficial to cast the spell in response to a board wipe. They might not think that way. They might just say, I'm going to wait. Maybe it won't actually work this time. And then you can really be getting your value in there. So really cool stuff here for number 5 on the list of why Boom Pile is powerful. Number 6, because it costs 0 to activate, it will allow you to be the first one to rebuild 75% of the time if you go for that traditional approach where you're playing it down, waiting until the next end step, activating it, and then if that doesn't work, then you activate it again on your upkeep. So because it costs 0, it's not going to reduce your mana production at all. In fact, sometimes I'll have a mana doubler. Like let's say I've got a... there's that 6-drop enchantment. Or, you know, let's just go with Zendikar's... Zendikar's Rising? No, that's not it. It's the... What's that card called? Man, I can't think of the card. Anyways, let's just say I have a mana doubler out there that's allowing my mana to be producing twice as much mana. Let's say Caged Sun, right? That's a simple example. With Caged Sun, I might look at my hand and say, okay, if this works on the end step before my turn, that's actually a bad thing for me. I need his double mana to be able to be the first one to rebuild. And I say I'm okay taking that 25% risk reduction, where instead of having a 75% chance of being the first one to rebuild, now I only have a 50% chance, because when it gets to my main phase, I'm going to tap all my mana, produce a lot of mana with my mana doubler, and then activate the Boom Pile to try to blow up the board. There have been times where I've done that and it's worked. Obviously, there are some times that I do that and it doesn't work. But regardless, it's still important to try sometimes to kind of modulate what you're doing to give yourself the best chance of winning. So, Boom Pile can be used either a 50% chance if you want to have a mana doubler and produce a lot of mana. But the benefit here is because it costs 0 to activate, it's going to cost 4, and that's it. Except for tax effects, it's never going to cost more than 4 to get that board wipe to actually work. Again, it's not a sacrifice effect. I think a lot of people tend to think of it as tap, sacrifice, flip a coin, because if that were the case, yeah, it'd be pretty bad. 50% of the time it doesn't do anything. But because it doesn't sacrifice, you can just keep tapping it over and over and over. You can keep maybe getting the chance where you can be the first one to rebuild. All right, and then last, but certainly not least, it also has room for synergy. So if that was not enough for you, you want to be able to bring this up even higher, that's where we can go for it. We can actually add synergies in it, give it indestructibility, untap it, give ourselves the ability to tap to flip multiple coins, right? Give ourselves some way to recur artifacts. All those things makes Boom Pile really, really amazing. So that is all that I have prepared here. Unspoken Blood says solid points. Well, I appreciate that. That is the full talk on Boom Pile. So does anyone have any questions while we're here at the very end? I really appreciate all of you that were able to stop by. I'll wait maybe about 5 or so minutes and we'll see if anybody's got any questions. But again, I really do like Boom Pile. I've got 30 decks at this point. I'm only missing 2, so the 2 that I'm missing is going to be a Teamer deck and a Selesnya deck. I've got 2 of each monocolor deck. I'm working right now on number 2 for the mono black. Pretty tough deck for me to build off. I'm excited to kind of show you guys what I find. But yeah, in every single one of those 30 decks, I've got Boom Pile in there. And again, it's because I think it's that powerful. You might be looking at cards in your decks and saying, you know, there's this one card I don't think is that great, but I love playing it. It used to be Time Sifter for me. I used to think like, this is so cool because it makes it so that if people are following the traditional rule of trying to get your curve down as low as possible, this actually works in a different way where you can, use Time Sifter and give people who happen to have the higher curves every extra turn as much as possible. That seems kind of cool for me. Kind of helps out the decks that are not as low to the ground and hurts the decks that are. And so I kind of like that idea, but over time I felt like, I cast one card, I play it from my hand. There's no guarantee that I'll be the one to have the highest CMC, although if I do have the highest mana value among my spells, sure, I'll play Time Sifter, but not anywhere near as powerful and as auto-playable as Boom Pile. And so I want to make a clear distinction. This is not a pet card in that I look at it and I think, okay, this is not that great, but I like playing it in every deck. It's kind of like representing me. No, that's not it at all. I look at Boom Pile and I think, oh my gosh, this is so super powerful. I have to play it in all my decks if I want those decks to be better, right? Having Boom Pile in there makes them better than not having them in there. So the question is, am I playing other cards in every single one of my decks? No, actually I'm not. I'm not even playing Soul Ring in all of my decks. I've got 2 decks where I'm not playing Soul Ring. The first one is my Rada Heir to Kel deck, which is an enchantment deck that has a lot of artifact destruction. That's kind of like a small sub-theme of the deck where I'm just blowing up all the artifacts because I don't really have any in the deck. The only artifact I have in there is Boom Pile. Why? Because if I have an artifact destruction spell, I got Boom Pile on the battlefield. That's already going to do the same thing. So I can activate the Boom Pile. If it works, great. If it doesn't work, I'm just going to wait to activate it again. I'm not going to cast the artifact destruction spell. Otherwise, I probably would not have cast Boom Pile in the first place. So that's what we're looking at with Boom Pile in terms of that deck. Another deck that I'm not playing Soul Ring in is Zakama Primal Calamity. Now this is a weird commander deck where it's a commander that wants to untap our lands. So that means it's not untapping our Soul Ring. So when we've got stuff like mana doublers there, and we've got things like things that can ramp out more lands for us, having a Soul Ring kind of feels worse than a land in that deck. And so in a way, I just kind of upgraded the deck from having Soul Ring to having a land instead of Soul Ring. So there are some situations where Soul Ring is not that great, but Boom Pile really feels like it's always going to be good, no matter what you're playing. There is one deck, because I always ask myself, is there ever a deck where I would not play Boom Pile? And the only one that I can think of that comes anywhere close to never wanting to play a Boom Pile, like absolutely never, is the deck with Nikia of the Forgotten Ways. I think it's let's see if I can type this in here. I'll pull it up in the chat. Nikia of the Old Ways is a 5-mana legendary creature. It's a Centaur Druid 5/5 that says you can't cast non-creature spells, and whenever you tap a land for mana, add 1 mana of any type that land produced. So if we've got Nikia on the battlefield, which will happen every now and then because we're playing a commander deck, we've got it in our command zone, we can play it out there. If I top deck a boom pile, feels pretty rough. Feels like I can't even cast that. So is that worth playing boom pile in there? I don't know. I mean, it's also something that we could play before we get out Nikia. So it feels like one of those things where maybe I would play it, maybe I wouldn't. But that's the only deck that I can think of that would be like, ooh, maybe I wouldn't actually play the boom pile. And from what I can see, it looks like nobody's got any questions. So if that's the case, we're going to go ahead and wrap up this podcast here. Again, thank you so much for watching or listening, whether it's on YouTube, Twitch, or Spotify. Really appreciate you all, and I will see you all next time. So thank you so much, and see you next time. See ya.